The silver sedan had been parked across the street for 3 days. At first, Aaliyah Carter didn't think much of it. People parked there all the time. But by the third morning, when she caught her own reflection in its tinted window and realized the car hadn't moved once, her gut started to whisper what her mind didn't want to hear. She was being watched. Aaliyah was a journalist. Or at least, that's what her credentials said. But lately, it felt more like she was a soldier in a war nobody cared about. 3 women from Jersey City had vanished in 6 weeks, and the police had already buried their files under the words, probable runaway. But Aaliyah saw a pattern. They all worked near the port. They all had debts. And they all disappeared right after accepting job offers that seemed too perfect to be real. So she kept digging, because somebody had to. Her cramped Hoboken apartment looked like an evidence board exploded inside it. Screenshots, shipping manifests, maps. 3 faces stared back from her laptop like silent ghosts. Michelle Torres, Sarah Kim, Amanda Wells. She whispered their names sometimes, like a promise that she'd find the truth, even if it killed her. By the time midnight hit, her coffee was cold and her body begged for sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop. All paths lead to Warehouse 19. That's what her latest note read, and that was the line that would change her life. She didn't plan on going back to the port that night, but the urge was too strong. That gut-deep instinct journalists get when they know a story's about to turn dangerous and real. The air smelled of rain and rust. Streetlights bled through mist. Aaliyah parked 3 blocks away and walked quietly toward the chain-link fence, her scarf pulled tight around her face. And then she saw them. 2 black SUVs, no license plates, pulling up to the side of the warehouse. 4 men stepped out, moving like they owned the dark. One of them had a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. That's the kind of detail Aaliyah's brain never forgot. She raised her camera. The shutter whispered. Once, twice, 60 times. But it was the 37th photo that made her blood run cold. In that one, a group of women were being led across the yard, heads down, shoulders slumped, walking like they'd already stopped believing in rescue. That was when Aaliyah realized this wasn't just about missing persons, it was human trafficking, and she had proof. The next morning, her editor, Mark Sullivan, tried to talk sense into her. Aaliyah, you can't keep chasing these people alone. You're not chasing a story anymore. You're chasing death. But she just smiled, exhausted and stubborn. You didn't hire me to play it safe, Mark. He sighed. Then at least check in with me daily. Promise. She promised. But she didn't mean it. That evening, a text arrived from an unknown number. Stop asking questions about the port. No name, no threat spelled out, just a warning. And maybe it should have scared her more than it did. But Aaliyah wasn't built to walk away. By Thursday, exhaustion had taken the edge off her fear. Her hands still shook, but she'd stopped pretending to care, until she got a call from someone she didn't expect. Amanda Wells, cousin to one of the missing women. Her voice was quiet, cracked. I can't talk here, she said. Meet me Thursday night, after 9, the back dining room at Lucia's. And just like that, Aaliyah's heartbeat found a rhythm again, equal parts hope and dread. Lucia's was all warm light and polished wood. The kind of place where people talked too loud over good wine, pretending the world outside wasn't dangerous. Aaliyah sat alone in the back section, pretending to read a menu while her nerves kept time with her heartbeat. At 8:53, Amanda appeared briefly, hair pulled back, eyes wide, pretending to work. She nodded once at Aaliyah and disappeared again. 9:12. The air shifted. 2 men walked in. The kind of men who didn't just enter a room. They scanned it, measured it, owned it, and one of them had that scar. Aaliyah's stomach dropped. Her table was too far from the kitchen, too close to the wall. The exit was blocked. She was trapped. When Amanda returned, her hands trembled as she set down a glass of water Aaliyah hadn't ordered. They're looking for you, she whispered. They showed your photo to the manager yesterday. Said you were taking pictures down at the docks. Aaliyah's throat went dry. What do I do? Amanda shook her head helplessly. I don't know, just act normal. Normal? She could barely breathe. The men had taken a table near the entrance, a perfect view of every exit. They weren't eating. They were waiting. Aaliyah's hand moved to the napkin dispenser beside her coffee. Her pen was already in her pocket, An old habit from years in the field. She pulled out a napkin and wrote one word, quick and desperate: help. Her handwriting shook so badly the ink bled at the edges. She set it on the corner of the table, visible but not too obvious. If someone noticed, maybe she had a chance. If no one did, she didn't let herself finish that thought. Across the room, a man at table 12 looked up. He wasn't smiling, wasn't talking, just watching. His suit was sharp, black, the kind of expensive you could only buy with power. He didn't look like a savior, more like danger wrapped in patience. But when his gaze met hers, everything around her slowed. He looked at her face, then at the napkin, then at the men near the door, and in that instant, Aaliyah knew he understood everything. He stood, unhurried, moved across the floor like a man used to controlling outcomes. His people, because of course he had people, shifted their positions, quietly cutting off angles she hadn't even noticed. He reached her table, picked up the napkin, folded it neatly, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "You're having a difficult night," he said, voice deep and calm, carrying the faintest trace of an Italian accent. Aaliyah's lips parted, but no sound came out. "Who are you?" she managed finally. He leaned closer, just enough for his breath to brush her ear. "The man at table 12, he said softly, "who just decided to keep you alive." And in that moment, heart pounding, fear swallowing her whole, one thought echoed in Aaliyah's head. If you were me, would you have stayed to meet Amanda? Or walked away before it was too late? For a second, Aaliyah thought she might have imagined it. The calm voice, the folded napkin, the way the entire restaurant seemed to obey this man's silent gravity. But when she looked up again, he was still there, standing close. Body angled just enough to block her from view. "Don't turn around," he murmured. "The men at the front, they've decided you look familiar. That's a problem we're going to fix right now." Aaliyah's heart drummed against her ribs. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Luca Moretti," he said simply. "And unless you want to disappear like those women you've been writing about, you're coming with me." She stared at him, searching for deception in his eyes. But all she found was control. Cold, confident control. Luca extended his hand across the table, palm up. "Get your things. Stay close." Aaliyah hesitated only a heartbeat before she took it. His grip was firm, grounding, not gentle but steady, like someone who'd made peace with danger long ago. He guided her toward the entrance, his body shielding hers. The men at the front looked up, recognition flickering behind their eyes. But Luca's people were already in place, one standing near the bar, another by the door, all moving with the same eerie precision. It wasn't chaos, it was choreography. Outside, rain poured harder, drenching them both before they even reached the curb. A black SUV waited, engine running, back door open. Luca ushered her in and followed, giving a curt nod to the driver. "Drive," he said. Only when the city lights blurred behind them did Aaliyah find her voice. "Why did you help me?" Luca turned toward her, expression unreadable. "Because they wouldn't have stopped. And I don't like seeing women hunted in my city." "Your city?" she echoed. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took out the folded napkin from his jacket pocket and smoothed it open. Her shaky handwriting stared back up at them. "Help." "That was smart," he said quietly. "You trusted the room enough to ask for help. You just didn't know who'd be listening." "Are you with them?" she asked. "Those men at the port?" "No," he said. "I'm worse. I'm the reason they're afraid to expand too far." Aaliyah blinked. "You're Mafia." "Close enough." His tone was casual, like he was talking about the weather. "But I don't traffic people. That line doesn't get crossed in my world. Not ever." The rain outside thickened, tapping the SUV windows like anxious fingers. Aaliyah crossed her arms, half from fear, half from the cold dripping down her back. "So what now? You just sweep in, save the terrified reporter, and disappear into the night?" He smirked faintly. "Not quite. You're staying somewhere safe until we find out how deep this goes." "I can't disappear," she said sharply. "I have work to finish. Evidence. Sources. My editor." "Your editor can wait," Luca interrupted. "If they caught you tonight, there wouldn't be a story left to write." The words hit harder than she wanted to admit, because deep down, she knew he was right. They drove across the George Washington Bridge toward Fort Lee. The skyline shrank behind them, glowing faintly through the rain. Luca's phone buzzed twice. He checked the screen, replied with a single word in Italian, Pulito, and pocketed it again. Aaliyah finally exhaled. Where are you taking me? Somewhere I can keep you alive, he said simply. When the SUV stopped, she saw a quiet apartment building tucked behind a row of trees, the kind of place that didn't want to be found. Inside, everything was clean, minimalist, expensive. Security cameras on every corner, reinforced locks on the door. You'll stay here, Luca said, shrugging out of his wet jacket. There's food, clothes, Wi-Fi. Don't open the door for anyone but me or the guard outside. His name's Marco. He doesn't talk much, but he's loyal. Aaliyah looked around. So, am I your guest or your prisoner? Luca tilted his head, almost smiling. That depends. Do you plan on running back to the people who want you dead? She folded her arms. I'm not good at being protected. He walked closer, stopping just short of her personal space. And I'm not good at watching people die when I can stop it. Their eyes met, a spark of stubbornness crashing against another. After a long silence, Aaliyah sighed. Fine. One night. One night, he repeated softly, though something in his tone made her doubt he meant it. Hours later, when the apartment had gone still, Aaliyah sat on the couch staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. Every creak made her flinch. Every shadow looked like movement. On the coffee table lay the napkin, that single word written in panic. It felt like a confession now. She reached for her phone and typed a message to her editor. I'm safe. We'll explain everything soon. Trust me. Her finger hovered over send. She deleted it instead. The truth was, she wasn't sure who she could trust anymore. She thought of Luca, the man with quiet danger in his voice and eyes that seemed to see through lies. He'd saved her life, yes, but he'd also taken control of it without asking. Part of her wanted to believe his talk about morality and lines he wouldn't cross. The other part wondered if she'd just traded one kind of predator for another. Outside, thunder rolled across the river. Somewhere beneath it, Aaliyah whispered to herself, what if this man is my way out, or my way under? And that's the thing about danger. It doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it comes with a rescuer who looks you in the eye and says, trust me. Sometimes the line between trusting someone and surrendering control can feel paper thin. If you were Aaliyah, would you stay the night under Luca's protection, or walk away and risk facing the cartel alone? By morning, the rain had stopped, but the world still looked washed out. Gray sky, slick streets, a city trying to pretend nothing had happened. Aaliyah hadn't slept. She'd spent the night pacing between the couch and the window, watching the trees outside sway in the early wind. When Luca returned around 8 a.m., he was carrying 2 cups of coffee and the kind of calm that only comes from someone used to chaos. You didn't sleep, he observed, setting 1 cup in front of her. Aaliyah gave a humorless laugh. Kind of hard to relax when the mob kidnaps you for your own safety. Luca raised an eyebrow. If I kidnapped you, you wouldn't be drinking Italian roast in silk pajamas. You'd be in a warehouse with no windows. She stared at him. That's supposed to make me feel better? He smirked faintly. It's perspective. The coffee was good. Too good. Smooth. Dark. The kind that spoiled her for whatever cheap blends she'd been living on. Luca sat across from her, elbows resting casually on the table. Tell me everything you know about the women who disappeared. So she did. She told him about Michelle Torres, who'd been excited about her new apartment before vanishing. Sarah Kim, who left behind her camera and her college books. And Amanda Wells, the cousin who'd almost made it out alive. By the time she finished, her throat was tight and the coffee had gone cold. Luca listened without interrupting, face unreadable. Only the slow tightening of his jaw gave away what he was thinking. These girls, he said finally. They were taken from my territory, Aaliyah frowned. Your territory? Yes, he said simply. The docks, the port, that entire stretch of waterfront. It's under my family's protection. Nothing moves there without us knowing. Or at least, that's how it should be. So how did this happen? That's what I intend to find out. He stood and moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to watch the street below. You said you saw 2 SUVs that night. You got pictures? Aaliyah nodded. 63 of them. Show me. She hesitated. If I do, you have to promise you're not going to. He turned, eyes dark. To what? To kill anyone, she said. At least not before we know what's really going on. Luca's smile was brief, sharp. I don't make promises I can't keep. But I'll look. She opened her laptop and pulled up the folder labeled Port Investigation. The images filled the screen. Grainy, distant, but undeniable. Photo number 37 stopped him cold. The scarred man. The women walking in a line. Luca leaned closer, his hand brushing the back of her chair. That one, he said. The man with the scar. You have no idea who he is, do you? No, Aaliyah said. Should I? He works for the Sinaloa Network, the Mexican syndicate that's been trying to move into Jersey for months. They specialize in drug routes, and now, apparently, in people. The words hit like a punch. You mean human trafficking, Aaliyah said softly. Yes. They recruit women through fake job listings, move them through port warehouses, then ship them south. They vanish before anyone even knows they're gone. Aaliyah swallowed hard. How long has this been going on? Luca's expression hardened. 3 months, maybe more. I've been watching them, but I didn't have proof. Until now. He turned to face her fully. You did what entire law enforcement units failed to do. You found them. Aaliyah looked at him, searching for sarcasm. But there was none. He meant it. For the first time since this nightmare began, someone wasn't dismissing her. Someone believed her. Still, her voice trembled. So what happens next? Luca picked up her coffee cup and refilled it from the pot he'd brought. His calm felt deliberate, the kind of stillness that came before a storm. What happens next, he said, is I dismantle their operation before they realize we're coming. Aaliyah stared at him, disbelief flickering across her face. You can't just dismantle a cartel, Luca. This isn't one of your movies. This isn't a movie, he said, voice low. It's business, and I don't lose what's mine. She set the coffee down hard. You mean territory, not people. They're not your property. For a moment, something like amusement softened his features. You really don't know me yet, do you? Should I? He stepped closer, his voice quiet but edged. The Moretti family doesn't traffic humans. We don't deal in children, women, or narcotics. We protect our trade and our people. These men broke the rules. That makes them my problem. Her heart pounded. And mine. He tilted his head. Why yours? Because I started this story, she said, and I'm going to finish it. There it was again. That spark. That stubborn fire that made him look at her longer than he should. You really don't scare easily, do you? Aaliyah met his gaze. I've lived in this city my whole life. You think 2 men with guns are scarier than rent prices? Luca actually laughed. Quiet, surprised, almost genuine. The sound disarmed her more than it should have. By midday, the apartment had turned into an impromptu war room. Luca made phone calls in Italian while Aaliyah spread her notes across the dining table, organizing evidence into neat piles, timelines, photos, interviews. Every so often, Luca would pause to glance over her shoulder, correcting small details. A shipment date, a vessel name, a street she'd misidentified. You have a terrifying amount of information, he murmured. I told you, I'm good at my job. He smiled faintly. And dangerously curious. Occupational hazard. When she finally looked up from her laptop, he was watching her. Not the way men watch women, but the way generals watch the horizon for movement. You're not safe out there, he said quietly. They'll come after you. The men at Lucia's weren't improvising. They were hunting. They know you took those pictures. Aaliyah's throat went dry. So what do I do? Hide here forever? Not forever, Luca said. Just until I make sure they can't touch you again. You mean until you take them out, she said, half a statement, half an accusation. He didn't deny it. You can call it what you want. I call it balance. Aaliyah shook her head slowly. You don't believe in justice. You believe in control. Justice, Luca said, is what the powerful call revenge when it works. The line lingered in the air between them, heavy and sharp, and Aaliyah, despite everything in her, felt something strange, the pull of curiosity, the edge of attraction, the beginning of trust she didn't want to feel. That night, as she lay awake listening to the hum of the security system, She whispered to herself, "He's dangerous, but maybe danger's the only thing keeping me alive." We've all met people who felt like both a risk and a rescue at the same time. If you were in Alia's place, would you trust Luca enough to stay, or walk away knowing you'd lose your only ally? The next morning, dawn crawled over Fort Lee in pale stripes of gold. Alia sat at the window, still in the oversized sweatshirt Luca had left for her. The world outside looked calm, and completely unreal compared to the one she'd stepped into 48 hours earlier. When the door clicked open, she flinched. Luca stepped in, coat half buttoned, dark hair damp from the rain. "You're awake early," he said. "Didn't really sleep." He nodded, unsurprised. "Come with me." "Where?" "To the place where your story began." "The docks." The drive back to the port was quiet except for the steady hum of the tires. Luca's driver Marco didn't speak. Luca didn't either, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was calculating. When they finally stopped, the familiar rust smell of salt and metal filled Alia's lungs. Warehouse 19 loomed ahead, gray, massive, indifferent. Luca gestured for her to stay close. "We've cleared the area. The men who worked last night are gone. You'll see why I wanted you to come." Inside, the warehouse looked ordinary, until she noticed the floorboards. The ground was newly patched, uneven. Luca kicked one panel loose with his boot. Beneath it, wrapped in plastic, were stacks of fake IDs, burner phones, and passports. Her breath caught. "This is how they move them. New identities, new countries." Luca crouched, flipping through the passports. "Women from everywhere. Nigeria, Ukraine, Venezuela, Thailand. They disappear, and by the time anyone notices, they've been reborn somewhere else under new names." Alia pressed her hand over her mouth. "How many?" "Hundreds," Luca said quietly. "Maybe thousands." He straightened, dusting his hands. "You were right, Alia. They're using our docks, which means someone on the inside sold access." Her mind spun. "Inside the Port Authority?" Luca nodded once. "And probably in my own crew." A chill moved down her spine. "You have a mole." He met her gaze. "Not for long." They left the warehouse and Alia followed him into the pale morning light. Her fingers were cold, but her pulse raced with something new. Purpose. "Let me help," she said suddenly. "This isn't a story anymore." "It's exactly a story," she shot back. "And I can do things you can't. I can talk to people, ask questions without a gun on my hip. You'll never get close to the victims without me." Luca's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what happens when you walk into my world." "I already did." He looked at her for a long time, then sighed. "Fine. But from now on, you don't move without me." The cafe meeting. Later that afternoon, they met with a dock worker named Luis in a small cafe off Communipaw Avenue. The man's hands shook as he stirred his coffee. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered. "But there's a container scheduled tonight, number 44C. Manifest says industrial textiles, but no one loads it. It just appears." Alia leaned forward. "Where does it go?" Luis hesitated. "South, Veracruz. Same ship every time. Same crew." Luca's voice was calm. "Who signs off the manifests?" Luis swallowed. "Someone inside customs. A woman named Carla Dominguez. She's not stupid. She covers her tracks." Luca slid an envelope across the table. Cash. Thick. "You didn't tell us anything." Luis nodded, eyes down. When they left the cafe, Alia's mind was racing. "Customs? That means the government's involved." "It means corruption," Luca said. "And corruption means leverage." The stakeout. That night, they parked near the port, hidden between freight containers. The sea wind was cold, laced with diesel and salt. Alia watched through the camera lens as trucks rolled in, one after another. Men shouted in Spanish, then in Italian. Somewhere in the shadows, Luca's men blended in with the crew. Her fingers trembled on the camera. "You have men everywhere. Information is survival," Luca said quietly. "But you," he glanced at her, "you have something even more dangerous." "What's that?" "Belief." She smiled faintly. You say that like it's a flaw. In my world, it is. Suddenly, movement at the far gate. A small white van pulled up beside the container labeled 44C. The doors opened, and 3 women stepped out, blindfolded, wrists bound. Aaliyah gasped. They're loading them now! Luca's voice dropped. Stay here! Luca! But he was already gone, disappearing into the dark. Aaliyah watched through the lens, heart pounding as chaos erupted. Luca's men cut the floodlights, shouting in Italian. Shots cracked in the distance. The women screamed. Aaliyah's instincts kicked in. She grabbed her camera, opened the car door, and ran toward the warehouse. The night was all smoke and shouting. Someone grabbed her arm, rough, gloved. She twisted free, tripping on the gravel. A flashlight beam hit her face. Who are you? A voice barked. Before she could answer, another voice cut through the noise. Smooth, commanding. Let her go. Luca appeared from the shadows, gun in hand. She's with me. The guard froze, then slowly lowered his weapon. Luca pulled her behind cover as more men poured into the yard. I told you to stay in the car. You told me you wouldn't get shot, she snapped. We both failed. Despite the chaos, he gave a sharp laugh. You're impossible. And you're bleeding, she said, noticing a red line across his arm. It's nothing. It's not nothing. She tore a strip from her scarf, pressed it against his wound. Her hands were shaking, but her voice wasn't. You saved them. Not yet, he said. They still have the driver. Minutes later, the port was silent again. The women were safe, shaken, crying, but safe. Luca's men vanished before the sirens arrived, leaving no trace. Aaliyah sat on the curb, chest heaving, camera hanging from her neck. Luca crouched beside her, hand warm on her shoulder. You okay? She nodded slowly. I think so. But this... She looked at the women being escorted by police. This isn't over, is it? No, he said quietly. Tonight was a message. They'll strike back. Her eyes met his. Then we hit first. For a long second, they just looked at each other. 2 different worlds colliding under the harsh glow of police lights. Some partnerships are born from trust, others from survival. If you were standing there beside Luca, camera in hand, would you keep fighting with him? Or walk away before the danger swallowed you both? By the time the last patrol car pulled away, dawn had returned, thin, gray, and uneasy. Aaliyah and Luca drove in silence. The air between them felt heavier than the night they'd just survived. Inside the SUV, her camera sat on her lap, still warm from the flashes. Every picture inside it was proof of the women, of the operation, of the men they'd stopped. Proof that could burn everything down. When they reached the safe apartment, Luca poured 2 drinks he didn't touch. You did good tonight, he said. That's supposed to be a compliment? An observation. Aaliyah smiled faintly, exhaustion softening the edges of her sarcasm. You know, you have this way of saying thank you without actually saying it. He almost smiled back. Don't get used to it. She uploaded the photos, arranging them into folders, tagging dates, faces, containers. Every frame told the same ugly story: power, profit, silence. But one image stopped her cold. The scarred man again, shaking hands with someone half hidden in shadow. She zoomed in, adjusted contrast, and froze. The second man was familiar, too familiar. She scrolled through her contacts, pulled up a picture from her newsroom's holiday party. Same jawline, same ring, Mark Sullivan, her editor. Aaliyah's pulse kicked. She stared at the screen, whispering, No, it can't be. Luca stepped behind her. What did you find? She swallowed hard. My editor, the man who told me to stop digging. He's in this photo. He's working with them. Luca's face darkened. Then you've been compromised from the start. Her stomach twisted. He warned me not to go to the docks. He knew exactly what would happen. Luca's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. He's been feeding them your movements. That's how they found you at Lucia's. Aaliyah stood, trembling. I have to confront him. No. Luca's hand closed around her wrist. You go near him. You're dead before you hit send on a text. I can't just sit here. You can live. That's the smart option. But she shook her head. I don't do smart. I do right. That night, she ignored him. While Luca was in the adjoining room making calls, she slipped out with her camera and a burner phone. The city lights stretched below like molten glass as she took a cab toward the newspaper office. Every street felt like it was watching her. When she reached the building, the lobby lights flickered low. Only Mark's office glowed upstairs. She climbed the stairwell, heart hammering against each echoing step. He was there, tie loose, eyes tired, tapping through emails. Aaliyah, he said, startled. What are you doing here? I thought you were... Dead? She finished for him. Mark froze. Where did you hear that? She dropped a printed still from her camera on his desk. The handshake. The port. The scarred man. I didn't hear it, she said. I saw it. His jaw tightened. You don't understand what you're involved in. No, you don't. Those women, the ones you called runaways, they're alive because I didn't listen to you. He sighed, almost regretful. I tried to keep you safe, but once you took those photos, there was no going back. Who are you working for, Mark? Before he could answer, a red laser dot slid across the window behind him. Aaliyah's instinct screamed. Down! She yelled, diving as glass exploded. The bullet shattered the lamp. Mark collapsed, clutching his shoulder. Outside, tires screeched. Aaliyah crawled across the floor, grabbed his phone, his hard drive, anything she could reach. Mark, stay with me. His voice was faint. Carla, Dominguez, customs. She runs it all. The manifest codes. Then his hand went slack. Sirens wailed in the distance. Aaliyah stumbled into the stairwell, clutching the evidence. Blood splattered on her sleeve. Her mind raced. Carla Dominguez, the insider, the real link. But before she could reach the exit, a shadow stepped out of the dark. Going somewhere? Luca. His coat was soaked, eyes unreadable. You went without me. You followed me? I had to. You don't realize how close you were to dying. He's alive, she said, breathless. He told me about Carla. She's the customs officer signing those shipments. Luca exhaled, voice low. Then the circle's complete. What do you mean? He hesitated. Carla Dominguez used to work for my father. She disappeared 5 years ago. Took contacts, money, loyalty. I thought she was gone for good. So this is personal. He met her eyes. It always was. They left the building just as the police arrived. In the SUV, silence hung between them like fog. Finally, Aaliyah said, You knew pieces of this all along. I knew enough to stay alive, he answered. But not that your editor was part of it. That changes everything. She studied him. What happens now? Luca's expression hardened. Now we finish it. We find Carla, burn her network, and make sure she never touches another life. And what if that means killing her? He looked away. Then we do what's necessary. Aaliyah turned toward the window, the city lights flickering past like ghosts. For the first time, she wasn't sure whether she was riding beside justice or vengeance. Sometimes the person helping you fight your enemies is fighting his own war. If you were Aaliyah, would you keep trusting Luca now that revenge is part of his plan? Or walk away before his justice became your undoing? Rain again. Always rain when the world fell apart. Aaliyah sat by the window of the SUV, watching the streets smear into ribbons of light. She could still taste the metallic tang of fear from the newsroom. Mark's blood had dried on her sleeve, a dark reminder of how close everything had come to ending. Luca's phone buzzed twice. He read the message, said nothing, and tucked it away. Something in his silence chilled her more than the storm outside. What happens now? She asked. He didn't look at her. Now we wait for the trail to move. Carla won't run far. She thinks she still has protection. The words were calm, but his hands told another story, white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Aaliyah leaned back, whispering to herself, protection from who? They stopped at a safe house on the outskirts of Newark. Abandoned warehouse. Single light upstairs. Inside, Luca's men were already waiting. Faces she didn't know, eyes that didn't meet hers. Luca nodded once. You stay here. I'll take a call. He disappeared behind a metal door, leaving her in the echoing quiet. The smell of oil and dust filled her lungs. On a table sat a folder stamped with the Moretti crest. Curiosity beat fear. She opened it. Inside were photos, not of traffickers, of her. Her at the cafe with Luis, her apartment, her mother's house in Atlanta. Every page screamed surveillance. Aaliyah's pulse spiked. She flipped to the last page. Luca's signature at the bottom, dated 2 weeks before she'd ever met him. The room tilted. He'd been watching her long before she wrote "help." The metal door clanged open. Luca stepped in, phone still in hand, but froze when he saw the folder. "So, that's what I am to you?" she whispered. "An assignment?" He closed the distance in 2 steps. "You weren't supposed to see that. Answer me." He exhaled, the sound rough. "I knew about you before Lucia's. You were getting close to the wrong people. I sent men to keep you safe. The car outside your apartment, the one that scared you, that was mine." Her chest tightened. "You followed me? To protect you. Luca, you lied. I kept you alive!" The shout bounced off concrete, leaving a stunned silence between them. He rubbed a hand over his face, softer now. "Everything I touch turns dangerous. I didn't want you dragged into this war." She stepped back, voice shaking. "It's too late for that." Outside, thunder rolled. She needed air, space, truth. Aaliyah slipped through the side exit, running until the warehouse lights blurred into the rain. Her thoughts screamed, "He saved me, he lied to me, and I still don't know which part of that hurts more." A car door slammed nearby. 2 silhouettes stepped from the shadows, men she recognized from the port. "Miss Carter," one said. "Mr. Moretti sends his apologies. He's waiting inside." "No, he didn't." Something cold pressed against her ribs. "He insists." They forced her toward another vehicle. She fought, kicked, screamed into the storm, but a sharp blow to her shoulder sent the world spinning. When she woke, she was tied to a chair in a dim office smelling of sea and gasoline. Her camera sat dismantled on the desk. A woman's voice drifted from the corner, smooth, accented. "Journalists, always so brave until they find themselves in the story." Aaliyah lifted her head. Carla Dominguez stepped into the light, perfect suit, calm smile. "You've caused quite the inconvenience," Carla said. "Luca should have kept you on a shorter leash." Aaliyah's stomach dropped. "You know him?" Carla smiled. "Sweet girl, he used to work for me." Back at the warehouse, Luca paced like a caged animal. The phone on the table vibrated, an untraceable number. Carla's voice purred through the speaker. "You always did collect strays, Luca. This one's adorable, such conviction in her eyes. What do you want?" "You know what I want. The manifest drive, the names, your silence. Bring them, or your journalist becomes tomorrow's headline." Luca's hand clenched. "If you touch her..." The line went dead. Aaliyah, still bound, whispered a prayer into the dark. "God, just one more chance." And somewhere across the city, Luca whispered the same thing. "Just one more chance to make this right." We've all had that moment when trust breaks and you don't know if the person you depended on is your shelter or your storm. If you were Aaliyah, alone in that chair, knowing the man who saved you also watched you, would you still believe he's coming back? For a long time, Aaliyah sat absolutely still, listening to the hum of the single fluorescent light above her. Fear had burned itself out hours ago, leaving only clarity, the kind that comes when your mind finally accepts there's no one left to save you. Her wrists ached against the ropes, but her fingers still worked. Each breath, each tiny sound in the room became part of a rhythm she could measure. Somewhere beyond the wall, she heard water lapping. A dock, the port. She was back where it all started. She whispered to herself, "Focus, breathe, think." It was what her father used to say when she froze before a track meet. Back then, fear was the sound of a starting gun. Now, it was the creak of a door. She tested the chair's legs. Wood, not metal. One joint was loose. She rocked gently, again and again, until the back screw gave a quiet pop. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Carla's perfume reached her before her voice. Sharp, expensive, clinical. "I hope you've had time to reflect," Carla said, circling her like a teacher correcting a paper. "Luca thinks in bullets. I think in leverage. Tell me where the drive is, and I might let you walk out of here." Aaliyah lifted her chin. "You wouldn't," Carla smiled. "No, but it's polite to pretend I might. When she turned toward the desk, Aaliyah pushed her chair forward just enough for the rope to catch on the jagged screw head she'd exposed. Twist, pull, twist again. A single strand gave way. She bit back a gasp. Downstairs, car doors slammed. Carla frowned and moved to the window. "Stay quiet," she ordered, pulling a gun from her coat. Aaliyah's heart stopped. Luca was outside, stepping from a black sedan, alone, hands raised. Rain plastered his shirt to his skin. He looked more ghost than man. Carla's smile widened. "Of course he came. He always does." She barked something in Spanish. "Search him. If he has the drive, bring it." Aaliyah didn't wait to hear the rest. She wrenched her hands free, grabbed the broken leg of the chair, and slammed it against the window latch. The crash was swallowed by the shouting below. The latch snapped. Cold air rushed in. She was 3 stories up, the dock below slick with rainwater. One misstep and she'd vanish into the river. Carla shouted behind her, "Stop her!" Aaliyah climbed onto the sill. "Tell Luca I finished the story myself." Then she jumped. The water stole her breath. Salt burned her throat. But she kicked, fought, surfaced, coughing under the pier's shadow. Her wrists bled where the rope had cut them, yet she was free. As she dragged herself onto the embankment, something hard jabbed her thigh. Mark's phone. She'd grabbed it instinctively before they took her. The cracked screen flickered, still logged into his email, and there it was. A full export of customs codes, the entire trafficking manifest, everything they needed to expose Carla, everything they needed to end it. A laugh broke from her lips, half sob, half victory. The story hadn't died with Mark after all. Across the compound, Luca faced Carla. She smirked. "You always underestimated me. You chase ghosts of honor in a world that has none." He shook his head. "You built your world on fear. I'm rebuilding mine on truth." Gunfire cracked somewhere outside. Lights went out, and in the confusion, Luca disappeared into the dark. He found her minutes later under the pier, shivering, clutching the phone like treasure. For a second, he just stared, relief breaking through the usual steel in his eyes. "You jumped," he said, disbelief soft. "You came," she answered. They both laughed once, wet, breathless, alive. "Carla's gone?" she asked. "Not yet, but she will be." Aaliyah shook her head. "No, she'll be exposed. If we hand this to the feds, she goes down clean. No blood." Luca hesitated. "Clean doesn't last in my world. Then maybe it's time to change worlds." Rain hissed against the dock as they stared at each other, 2 people who'd seen too much to go back. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we finish it your way. Sometimes survival means finding strength where you didn't know it lived. If you were Aaliyah, soaked, shaking, finally holding the truth, would you still risk trusting Luca one last time to see justice done?" They walked back to the car, soaked to the bone, the phone buzzing in Aaliyah's pocket like a small, persistent heartbeat. Messages from unknown numbers, encrypted pings from Luca's people, a single calm text from an FBI contact she hadn't met yet. "We received something. Be ready." They didn't sleep that night. There wasn't time. Aaliyah edited files with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, turning Mark's raw export into something clean. Dates, container numbers, routes, the names of the brokers and accounts Carla had used to launder money. Every line was cross-checked twice, every photograph labeled. She wrote the cover note with the kind of precision that had earned her late nights and cheap coffee in a newsroom that rarely noticed the people it covered. She didn't mention Luca. She didn't need to. The evidence had to stand on its own. Luca watched her work, folding and refolding a cigarette he never lit. There were moments when his face softened, when he looked at her not like an asset or a problem to solve, but like the person he'd met in a restaurant, the woman who'd written "help" on a napkin and changed his life. She felt that look like a hand on her lower back, protective, private, irrevocable. "We'll hand everything to Agent Whitmore at 2 sharp, he said finally. "No theatrics. You go in, you give them the drive, you keep your distance. I'll handle the ugly things so you don't have to watch." Aaliyah closed the laptop and met his eyes. "Promise me one thing." Her voice was thin but steady. "No blood." He surprised her by nodding. "No blood." The sting of the promise wasn't that it would restrain him. The sting was that he could make the promise at all. The meeting was arranged in a neutral place, a municipal building 2 blocks from the waterfront, where federal vehicles could arrive discreetly and agents could move unseen. Aaliyah wore a neutral coat, no jewelry, boots laced tight. Luca accompanied her to the curb and paused, fingers closing around hers for the faintest of seconds. "Wait for my signal," he murmured. She nodded and walked inside. Agent Sarah Whitmore was all business, efficient, tired-eyed in a way that meant she'd spent years seeing the kinds of things people tried to hide. She scanned the drive, then looked at Aaliyah with the kind of scrutiny that felt like being measured for a coffin and a coat at once. "You sure about this?" she asked. Aaliyah said, "Yes," and slid the thumb drive across the table. It felt heavier than it should have. Whitmore placed it in an evidence bag with gloved hands and set it aside. "You gave this to me anonymously?" she asked. "No," Aaliyah met the agent's eyes. "I'm not anonymous." Whitmore's gaze softened, just a fraction. "You have people watching you. All the time," Aaliyah replied. "But I'm tired of running." They agreed on the operation. Federal surveillance units would observe and move at 5 p.m. Consolidation teams would intercept shipments, and Whitmore would coordinate arrests with local task forces who couldn't be bought. The plan depended on timing and silence. Aaliyah felt the old journalistic thrill, the one that had pushed her into cold interviews and warm threats, and for a heartbeat, forgot the ache of the months that had led here. At 3:45, Luca's men started to move. They didn't look like soldiers. They looked like men prepared to be invisible. Plain cars, hands steady, faces blank. From the street, Aaliyah could see men near the docks setting up lights, checking tags, whispering into earpieces. She watched the water reflect the last light of day, a calm that hid the chaos. At 5, the first container rolled in. Whitmore's team moved like a shadow, federal badges glinting as they stepped from unmarked vehicles. The plan unfolded like a clock. Trucks that had been scheduled to leave were stopped. Men who controlled paperwork found their terminals blank. At the second checkpoint, a name flagged: Carla Dominguez. Her badge was real, her signature real, but the account numbers linked to shell companies. Whitmore's voice on the radio was low and controlled. "Move on, my mark!" Inside the warehouse, Aaliyah followed Whitmore's lead and stayed near the entrance, camera taped inside her coat in case evidence was needed. She watched the men who had stood outside Lucia's, the scarred one, the short, stocky one, as they realized their networks were unraveling. They looked around like predators surprised to find the water frozen under their feet. Then Carla appeared. She didn't run. She walked in like a woman who had rehearsed this moment in a million versions and could perform any of them. Her face was composed, eyes cold. "You should have stayed with your paper," she said to Luca, who had entered silently behind her, a dark shape filling the doorway. "You don't belong here." "No," Luca said. "You don't either." His voice was steady, the same voice that had once told Aaliyah he didn't traffic people. Now it carried the weight of a man willing to break the things he'd always broken only in private. Whitmore moved in. "Carla Dominguez, you are under arrest for conspiracy, human trafficking, and related charges." The words echoed off corrugated metal like verdicts. Carla didn't bolt. She smiled a small, infuriating smile and cocked her head. "You think this ends me?" she asked. "You think pinning symbols on a few clerks solves the market?" "You trafficked people," Aaliyah said, every syllable a sharpened stone. "You lied about their jobs, the paper trails, everything. You destroyed lives." Carla's eyes flicked to Aaliyah the way predators look at a wounded animal, amused. Behind her, men moved, and for a second, Aaliyah flinched, expecting a bullet. Instead, the men froze. Luca's people had already disarmed them quietly. Whitmore's officers made the arrests clean, professional, without the blood that had once been the easy punctuation of power. Carla was led away in cuffs, her arrogance intact but impotent. Aaliyah watched as federal agents rolled back the shipments, found the women hidden in sealed compartments, freed girls who had been folded into new lives. She watched them recover. It was messy, not the tidy courtroom boil-down she had imagined, but it was real. After Carla was processed and the warehouse was secure, Whitmore turned to Aaliyah. "We'll need your testimony. We'll need your images. If you want to keep covering this, we'll protect your identity in the reports. But you need to know, This will put you in the papers, and it will put you on lists. Are you ready for that? Aaliyah thought of Michelle's mother, of Sarah's roommate holding the camera in hands that trembled with grief and relief. She thought of Mark, and of the small throb in the place where grief had turned into determination. She'd been willing to die for truth once. Now she wanted to live for it. I'm ready, she said. In the days after, the world rearranged itself around the story. Carla's arrest cracked the network wide open. Agents traced bank accounts, followed phone trees, and slowly, painfully, rebuilt lives. Local newspapers ran the story with Aaliyah's byline, cautiously at first, then in a wave of national interest that brought interviews and awards and proposals she had never wanted and never imagined in equal measure. There was fallout. Mark's name came up. He had been compromised, coerced, threatened, and he'd paid a price in ways Aaliyah had been only beginning to understand. He survived. He testified. He told a story about fear and greed, about being a small man leaning on a larger machine until it folded him. The newsroom that had seemed safe now felt different. Some colleagues whispered about her choices. Others brought her coffee and hugs. The industry breathed the way industries do after someone makes a clean cut through rot. Grateful, awkward, greedy for the next story. Luca's footsteps sounded different in those days. He moved through the world with a weight that seemed to have shifted under him. He delivered a blow to traffickers and to his own code. The Moretti family, for all its history, had been forced to answer for the boundaries it set. Men like Anthony had left or were left. Alliances reshaped. Some of Luca's power diminished. Other dimensions of it hardened into something new. He withdrew from the front lines and put resources into rebuilding. Not just profit maps, but shelters, back channels to protect women who might otherwise be prey. In quieter moments, Aaliyah and Luca walked the city like two people who had been given permission to be ordinary for the first time. There was no pretense. They knew each other's sins, the calculations behind the kindnesses, the bargains. Love between them was not tender innocence, but chosen endurance, a promise made with eyes open, not a surrender. They learned how to argue without cutting, to exist in a world where danger could return in the shape of a phone call or a headline. At the courthouse, the day Carla's indictment was read aloud, Aaliyah stood with Michelle and Sarah and a dozen other families. They watched as a system that had at first failed them now moved to correct course. Judges gavel, agents with tired smiles, dogs that wagged and did their jobs like gentle sentinels. The women of the port came forward one by one to tell their stories. Some voices shook, some were blank, some were fierce and bright. Aaliyah took notes, hands steady. She had wanted the story when it was an idea on a dark night. She had wanted to save lives. Now she wanted to make sure the lives saved had a horizon. When the press asked about Luca, about the lines he'd crossed, Aaliyah said nothing that betrayed the bargains they'd made. She wrote the stories that needed writing, about complicity, about how systems fail, and about the small courage of people who would not be invisible anymore. Luca donated quietly to shelters and to legal funds. His name folded into a ledger that nobody advertised. He visited the women when they allowed it, bringing coffee, listening without explaining. One afternoon, months later, under an October light that softened the city, Luca took Aaliyah's hand on a crowded sidewalk. No dramatics, no promises to change the world overnight. He simply said, "We survived it." She smiled, thinking of the napkin folded in a pocket that night, the word help that had started this whole thing. "We did," she said. Then, because she could, because she had earned the right to laugh again, she asked, "So, what do we do next?" He squeezed her fingers. "We keep doing what we can, one life at a time." If you were Aaliyah, standing there with the city around you and the weight of stories in your pocket, what would you do next? Keep chasing the truth, even when it hurts, or step away into the quiet and let someone else carry the torch? The city never really slept. It only changed its rhythm. Months passed, and for the first time in years, Aaliyah learned what stillness could sound like. No sirens, no footsteps outside her apartment, no anonymous texts, just the steady hum of traffic far below and the low buzz of her coffee machine in the morning. The article series she'd written, The Docks of Silence, had gone national. It earned her awards, invitations, interviews, book deals she didn't want to think about. Strangers called her brave. Editors called her meticulous. But bravery was a strange word to her now. It didn't feel like something you owned. It felt like something that borrowed you for a little while and then left you changed. She spent her mornings writing smaller stories. Local pieces about missing person investigations. The quiet rebuild of the port community. The mothers who were learning to breathe again. At night, she sometimes walked along the waterfront where it had all started. The smell of salt and metal still lingered. So did the memory of Luca's voice the last night they'd spoken before he disappeared back into his shadows. "You don't need me to protect you anymore," he had said. "That's how I know you survived." She hadn't asked where he was going. Part of her hadn't wanted to know. Part of her had. Then, one late spring evening, a package arrived. No return address, no note. Just a flash drive sealed in plastic and a folded napkin inside. The same kind they used at Lucia's. Across it, in neat handwriting, a single word. Again. She sat very still, heart thudding once, twice. The air in the room seemed to thicken. She turned the napkin over. Faint traces of an emblem showed through the fibers. An unfamiliar crest, not Moretti's. Something new. The flash drive whirred to life when she plugged it in. Dozens of encrypted files appeared. Photos of shipping manifests, corporate records, internal government memos, a new network, different routes, different names. And in the middle of the file names, one that made her blood run cold. Verona Holdings, Port Newark Expansion. Her phone vibrated before she could even open the first file. A number she hadn't seen in months flashed on the screen. Unknown. Italy. She hesitated, thumb hovering. Then she answered. "Aaliyah Carter," she said, voice low. On the other end, a silence thick enough to feel. Then softly, "I told you we never really get to rest." Her chest tightened. "Luca, I sent you something. I noticed. You're not safe there anymore," he said. "They're building again, bigger, smarter. And this time, they're not just moving people. What are they moving? Money, influence, and they're using your story as their blueprint." Her breath caught. "My story? Every system you exposed, someone else is rebuilding it under a new name. They're calling it clean trade, but it's the same hands pulling the strings." She turned toward the window, the skyline glowing like a field of sparks. "Why tell me now? You're supposed to be gone." "I was," he said quietly, "until one of their buyers showed me a photograph of you." Her throat tightened. "A photograph?" He hesitated, and for the first time she heard something she had never heard in Luca Moretti's voice before. Fear. "They're watching you again." Her reflection in the window stared back. Older, harder, still carrying the same scar of adrenaline behind her ribs. "Then we stop them." He almost laughed, the sound edged with disbelief and affection. "You don't even ask how dangerous this is?" "Luca," she said, "if I asked that every time, I'd never pick up the pen." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just the faint buzz of distance, of oceans and time zones and unspoken things. Finally, he said, "Then you'd better start packing." "You want me to come to Italy?" "I want you to stay alive." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I've got." The line clicked off. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was the beginning of something else. Aaliyah turned back to the screen, scrolling through the encrypted folder. Inside one file was a photograph, grainy, surveillance style. It showed a conference room with a long glass table, half a dozen men in suits, and at the head of it, a woman whose face was turned away. The metadata said the photo had been taken 3 weeks ago in Milan. When she zoomed in, her breath caught again. The woman's ring. The same ring Carla Dominguez had worn. Gold with a thin silver band. Carla was supposed to be in prison. She opened another image. Different room, same woman, a timestamp, 2 days ago. "Oh God," Aaliyah whispered. "She's still alive." Her phone buzzed again. A new message, this time with coordinates. Milan, Dockyard 7, midnight. No signature, just 3 words. Finish the story. She sank into her chair, staring at the napkin, at the word written there. Again. The same word, the same plea. Only this time not from her but for her. The city hummed outside, indifferent, beautiful, a taxi horn, a child laughing somewhere in the street below. The world turning as if nothing had happened. She looked at her reflection in the darkened window. The same woman who had written help on a napkin and somehow survived. Only now she realized surviving wasn't the goal anymore. This time she wasn't waiting to be saved. She reached for her phone and dialed Whitmore. Agent Whitmore, it's Aaliyah Carter. I need clearance for international investigation access. The agent sounded wary. Carter, what are you getting yourself into? The story isn't over, she said. And you'll want in on this one. Aaliyah, if this is about Luca, it's about the system that built him, she said, cutting her off. And the people trying to rebuild it. Silence. Then Whitmore sighed. You always did know how to ruin a quiet weekend. I'll call you in the morning. When the call ended, Aaliyah leaned back, exhaling slowly. On the table, her old camera sat beside the folded napkin. The Word glared up at her. She slipped both into her bag, zipped it shut, and looked around her apartment. The notes pinned to her wall, the stacks of draft articles, the framed newspaper with her first front page. She whispered, half to herself, half to the ghosts of the stories that had made her. All right, let's begin again. Outside, thunder rolled far out over the Atlantic, a sound that could have been weather or war. And somewhere across that same ocean, in a warehouse near Milan, Luca Moretti stood beneath a leaking roof, staring at a new set of faces gathered around a map. He said nothing, only reached into his jacket and unfolded a napkin from months ago. The ink had faded, but the word was still there. Help. He stared at it for a long time before folding it again and tucking it into his pocket. She'll come, he said quietly. His second-in-command frowned. And if she doesn't? Luca's mouth curved, that small, dangerous smile she'd once called his armor. She always does. Back in New Jersey, Aaliyah booked her flight under a false name. She printed out the encrypted files, packed her notebook, her camera, and the courage that had never left her even when everything else had. At the airport gate, she turned on her recorder and spoke softly into it, like she always did before a big story. Day 1, she said. Same woman, same hunger, different war. She paused, smiled to herself, and added, Let's see what waits at Dockyard 7. The boarding call echoed overhead. She rose, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the gate. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of the next chapter, a story that hadn't yet learned whether it was about redemption, revenge, or something in between. And maybe that was the point, because some stories never really end. They just pass the pen to whoever's brave enough to pick it up again. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.